Well, hello, everybody. We are back in our question and answer series where a viewer from every state is asking you a question over the course of 50 weeks. So this week we have Jasmine from Ohio to ask me a question. I'm so excited. We've been trying to get this lined up for a long time, it feels like. So I'm excited it finally worked out.
Me too.
So what is your first question?
All right. So my first question, I guess it's kind of based off of those rumors, about death care. So thinking probably like 19th century when people would have the funerals in the homes. Was it true that if someone died in the wintertime when the ground was frozen, that they would have to keep the body in the home until the ground thawed? And they would be able to bury
That's
them?
a good question. I don't know if I've ever even thought about that because, back before there was really funeral homes and it was in the home, I would imagine, a lot of this is going to be guessing until I can look into. I would guess they would store them out in the barn because the home is going to be too warm. You're going to want to store them in the cellar or somewhere that was cold enough to just keep them cold. Because there's not a lot of areas, like in Michigan, you've got to really get up into Michigan, even for it to be so cold that they don't bury. So it's going to be just some of those northern, North Dakota and top areas of even Minnesota and stuff that they have possibly stored them. So I will have to ask around. I will ask some other funeral directors from areas that do that and see if they know where they were stored back in the day. I think that's such a good question, though. I would guess the barn. The barn, that's my final answer.
Let's go with the barn. Yeah, thinking about keeping them in the cellar or like the basement, that's a little creepy. But
And there might have been like a shed or something at a cemetery, but back then you buried on your land often. So
yeah,
on your farmland where you would have to be the one probably to store them. If it was somebody maybe in town, maybe there was a place in town that they designated for the storage of the dead, or like, I don't know, Bob Miller's barn. That's going to be where we store everybody that dies. That's such a good question. Okay, we're going to look into that one.
yeah. Okay. So I guess this is one of the yuckier questions. But when you're preparing a body of someone who they passed while they were on their period, does that change the preparation that much?
No, and I've had people, like if somebody dies with the tampon in, do you remove the tampon? Typically that person, if they, like a lot of illnesses that somebody who might be menstruating, that illness may cease the menstruation because of the illness, your menstruation may stop. So that's not a factor in some of those situations. If, let's say, somebody who's menstruating dies in a car accident, they're most likely going to go for an autopsy. During the autopsy, they're going to remove those items. So by the time that person gets to us, it's never even a factor. I've never, in 20 however many years of being licensed, I've not had a single person that had a tampon in, because they've been removed if they did have them during the course of the autopsy, typically.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't, it's just your uterus would be punctured during the aspirating, so it really wouldn't be a factor, and your body is releasing that uterine lining. So if your body is not making that release happen, it's just going to sit there, stationary. So it's not like you're going to bleed excess because of your period happening, because your body's not actually making it happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's a musculature and hormonal release, so to speak. So it wouldn't affect it. But I do get asked that question a lot, and I don't know if I don't even think I've ever addressed that specifically. So excellent question. You're doing good. What's your
Thank you. So I guess I'm a little bit of obviously, I think all of us who watch your channel are probably a little bit of death enthusiasts of sorts. But
just curious.
Just curious. But I had read about a community in Indonesia that they mummify the bodies of their deceased and then they keep them in the homes for a few years or so.
Yeah.
What are the legalities in the United States, or if it's state specific in Michigan, that would keep someone from doing that if that's what they wanted to do with one of their relatives?
It's a good question. There are, in some states, there are laws that you have to have somebody buried or cremated or in cold storage within a certain time period. Every state is not as specific as that. So there are some states you could probably get away with that, but then it's going to fall under the health department. So I could call and be like, hey, Jasmine has, her mom in her apartment and she's had her there for like 3 months. And they would look into it and probably cite it as a health violation or something. I'm sure you can find the legality area, but there's also loopholes in some of that. So I think if somebody wanted to, they could try to in some states, but you're going to probably get shut down for the most part just because of, you're going to have a smell for a certain time period. And then what if something happens to you and then you've got Rod and mom at home? And that culture, I do want to cover that in the video. I want to do like odd or, extraordinary death rituals and things. I'm planning on covering some of that because that one pops up quite a bit on Facebook. People will like share these things and it's like him standing with, his dad and he's got like a cigar in his mouth or something and he's got like a hat on him. And because I feel like I'm trying to think of the name because I feel like there's a holiday or something that you bring out your dead for this holiday and you celebrate with them in that culture. And then they put them back away or something. I'm trying to remember. It's going to come to me after we get off this, but yeah, I think it's fascinating. I think it's a bit yucky, but if that's your culture, I think you don't grow up with anything different. There's days I'm at the funeral home and I'm looking at bodies that are embalmed sitting around and I'm like, why do we do this? That even seems crazy. Or a whole bunch of people in boxes because they're going to the crematory, that seems crazy. So I think just death culture and death rituals in general, it's like, why do we do what we do? But if it's all you've ever done, like the Tibetan sky burial, if you grow up where, okay, they come in and they're going to hack apart mom and they're going to drag her up the mountainside and leave her for the vultures to come. It's just the norm, I guess. It's all what we learn. And
it's relative, really.
It's relative. That's one thing that worries me about, the culture of the direct cremation where you have generations that are not learning to care for the dead because they just get picked up, taken away and cremated. And there's nothing else that's done to care for our loved ones, essentially. And it's like, well, how long-term is this going to affect if the generations are being taught to not care for essentially the dead in that way? What's that going to look like down the road? So I wonder about that sometimes with that part of our culture, how that's going to affect long-term everything, not going to cemeteries, not celebrating a life any which way because they don't do any services. So it's very sad.
It is. We're already so removed
Yes.
from being like participatory. So
yeah, I think though during the COVID, this time where people can't do what they want, I'm wondering that if, a year from now, that's going to drive people to want to do more because they were told they can't. Even if it wasn't something maybe they wanted to do, it wouldn't have been an option. Mm-hmm. So in kind of that response, kind of that, what's that called? If I say, don't do this, and you're like, well, I'm going to do it because you told me not to do it.
Right.
What is that called? Like a mind game thing, like if that's going to happen. So I'm interested to see how that plays out over the next months and years in terms of what we do as a society if we kind of revolt because we were told we couldn't.
Right. Kind of swings back the other way.
Yeah. I think it might because the generations right now who are in charge are ones that don't like to be told what to do. So I think that might be what happens rather than embracing not doing anything, maybe we'll swing the other way and start doing more because we were told at one time we couldn't. The rebellion. It's the funeral rebellion. I don't know.
I love it.
Do you have any bonus questions on your list at all?
I have one that I've thought about since I was a little girl. Being a little girl at our like Polish Catholic funerals, the multi-day wake.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was I just remember being like 6 years old and like peeking my head in, seeing my great-grandfather in the casket, wondering if at nighttime they like tuck him in a way. I always wondered, do they close the casket? Do they put him in storage overnight? Do they just leave him out there with the casket open? And that was something I just remember being 6 years old, being like,
yeah,
oh, I hope he's okay overnight.
Yeah, they're just left there because there's no benefit to putting them anywhere else. The only reason somebody would maybe be moved is if it was the night before the service and you went from like a visitation room over to like the chapel and you moved them into the chapel. But closing the casket even isn't going to help. It can actually hinder, depending on air temperatures and stuff. It can create some condensation sometimes, which is weird, but depending on, temperatures and stuff. Yeah, I'm picturing leaving the funeral home at night and you turn off all the lights. The person's just there and you walk through and they're just there. And I guess when you're working there, you don't even think anything of it because there's just always somebody laying around that's dead. And if you work at a large firm, there's multiple people on multiple either tables or caskets or cots or whatever just laying around, and it just becomes so commonplace that I don't know, it is weird to think. I think it's, if I step back and look at it, I'm like, it is weird. Like we don't, like your mentality changes so much. It's not that it's not a person, but some of that goes away for the most part, where you're worrying about tucking in and everything in that stage of it where they're kind of behind the scenes, so to speak. But that is funny. Yeah. Oh, that's sweet though, that you were like, oh, do they like tuck them some way? That's cute. I love it. Yeah, I am, and I think about like, it would probably freak most people out, the fact that I'll turn off like everything but like one little light and it's pretty dark and I'm just walking through and I walk past. I'll say goodnight to people though. I will tell you that when I shut down for a visitation, I say goodnight when I leave the room to the person in the casket, which I don't, maybe that seems weird to people, but it is kind of weird to leave a room when there is a person in it, even though they're not going to respond. If they did, that they're not responding, but you still say, okay, good night, Bob, and turn the light and leave for the night or whatever. I always think if I'm nice to them, just in case anything, there's no coming back, there's no whatever, but it's still, I think, that zombie mentality once in a while. But it's like, even if something did happen, they'll know I was really nice.
I'm in the clear. I'm good.
Which is so stupid. I've probably never said that out loud, but yeah, if I'm nice, then they'll just be nice to me. It's so dumb of me to say.
No, I get it.
Oh my goodness. That's funny. I love it. Well, thank you. You're so sweet. Thank you for asking questions and joining me. Is that a picture of a dog or a cat behind you?
Oh my God, that's a picture of a cat. I was FaceTiming my sister recently and she said the same thing. She's like, is that really a cat in the picture?
I literally didn't notice it until just now. And I'm like, is that a dog or a cat?
It's a painting. It's a little painting.
Oh,
so, yeah.
Do you have that cat?
No, I have 2 Siberian forest cats. They're at my parents' right now, actually.
Oh, aren't they like hairy and long and big?
Yeah. They're going to be huge, so.
Yeah, they're like the big, almost like a dog,
Oh yeah, they're gonna be like 30 pounds. So.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So excited.
They're still kittens right now, so.
That's so fun. You'll have to send me a picture of them.
Yeah, of course.
A picture. That would be cool. Well, thanks everybody for joining me and Jasmine over in Ohio, and check us out next Sunday for our next video viewer question and answer series. I always get my V's all commingled trying to say it for you guys. Check us out next Sunday again and see who asks me questions next week. Bye, guys.